Welcomed by God is the theme for the 2015 by the United Methodist Women. As a Methodist, I have been taught that our church welcomes all people because that's what Jesus has done for us. Being a welcoming force is in the DNA of the United Methodist Women. In 1885, today's United Methodist Women began as the Women's Home Missionary Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church in New York City. Boy, am I glad we don't get called that anymore. These women identified a serious problem of immigrant women who had often traveled alone or with children in tow when they came to our American shores. When they arrived, they would have to navigate the immigration system and the dangerous docks of New York with no help. Until Helen Matthews, her husband James, their daughter Alma, and another person found a small house to rent in Lower Manhattan. There they offered these immigrants free lodging at the house, now called the Immigrant Girls' Home. They helped them to the next stage of their journey, finding ways to get them to the train station or helping them to connect with family in New York and beyond. Why bother? Because the United Methodist Women in New York realized that a single woman in a strange land were at a deadly disadvantage. There were people who would steal their luggage and their money. The women themselves might then be forced into a life of prostitution. One of the stories told of Alma was that she came across a young couple who had been swindled by a thief who exchanged the money they brought from the old country for only pennies. Miss Matthews writes that she knew where the thief was and went to his office with her umbrella and got their money back. When you think of the word welcome, are you thinking of the noun version, we give our friends a warm welcome? Or maybe the interjection form, welcome stranger, or possibly as an adjective, a welcome rest, she is welcome to try it, or you're quite welcome. Or how about as a verb, we welcome a change in our schedule. When you think of being a church or a UMW unit that is welcoming, how do you see that? Do you see it as in Romans 15:2, which says, each of us should please our neighbor for their good to build them up? We are called by God to look around us and help each other out and to build each other up. Can we be kind to each other and build each person up so that they are better to be able to go out and face their world? When we think of welcomed by God, what does that mean to us? Christ's love is welcoming to all. All are welcome, even invited and wanted at Christ's table. We as United Methodists are raised to know that everyone is allowed, even encouraged to take communion in our church. United Methodists are part of the Catholic tradition which teaches that the sacraments are a means of grace, and when we as a believer partake of the elements of Holy Communion, we affirm that God's grace is a part of our lives. As a means of grace, Holy Communion is not our action, but God's action. Another part of being welcoming is to remember that when new people come to us, they aren't familiar with the way we do things. Do we help those that haven't been here before by greeting them warmly? Are we a safe place that all can feel comfortable? Or do we look at them sideways if they sit in the wrong place, or maybe aren't dressed the way we think they should be? I honestly believe that we are very welcoming to new people. But I've been a part of this and the Agar congregation for as long as I can remember, so maybe I don't see the questions they may have. The processes of our church have been a part of me since I was a baby, so maybe I forget how they are different if you've never been here before. God calls us to be aware of others, to think less of our own wants and more about others. Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interest of others. Instead of seeing others as different, we are called to be a blessing to others, and that is not only for the people just joining us for the first time, but for those that have been with us for years. We have much more influence on how welcoming people believe our church is than we may think. After all, our church is each and every person that comes through the doors. Paul prayed that the Roman church would have a spirit of unity among yourselves as you follow Christ Jesus. Unity is not conformity. Unity is not two people doing the very same thing at the very same time. It isn't even agreeing with each other 100% of the time on everything you do. It sure isn't a dictatorship where most people are shut out and their ideas are not considered, or where most people shut up and go along because they're worried that some will become angry and leave our church to take their spoils to another. It is where we can listen to all sides and come to a place where we can compromise. It's okay to have differences. That's part of being human, and it's the way God made us. Husbands and wives have differences, but work hard on building common ground, talking through the differences, and maintaining a marriage, a unity in the face of all sorts of situations and obstacles. Differences aren't the problem. It's how we handle those differences. This righteous salvation, this great banquet on the mountain of the Lord, is not limited to physical descendants of Israel. Instead, it is free to all people without reference to nationality, ancestry, accident of birth, gender, rank, former religious affiliations, or physical defects. In other words, every sinner is welcome to partake of it. In fact, the qualification for coming is that we must confess we are sinners and cannot save ourselves. Everyone is welcome. The poor, the blind, the lame, the crippled, the lepers, the social outcasts, the foreigners, and even you and me. God excludes no one. Everyone is invited and welcomed to take part in the salvation of the Lord.